As many here will know, the subject of deafness and the issues facing the deaf community are very close to my heart. I wanted to take the opportunity of my first short debate to highlight some of these issues. I will cover three main points, namely the effect that hearing loss has within employment, the BSL Act 2022 and the inability of private audiology practitioners being able to carry out NHS work and the implication this has for waiting lists and the subsequent impact on people's health and well-being. I want to focus on these points because I believe there needs to be a better, more intuitive understanding by the government of the wider deaf community, particularly of the hidden aspects of hearing loss and how this has a profound effect on people's lives. In terms of employment, we know that at least 4.4 million working-age people in the UK have hearing loss. We also know that the employment rate for those with hearing loss is much lower compared to people with no long-term health issues or disability, typically 65% and 79% respectively. On average, people with hearing loss are paid at least £2,000 less per year than the general population, meaning that those with hearing loss can expect to earn considerably less over their lifetime, which has a knock-on effect in terms of providing for their families and enjoying the same lifestyle as people with no long-term health issues. A recent survey of those suffering hearing loss by the Royal Association of Deaf People found that those with hearing loss face a major, tougher working environment, and the majority felt that they had not been given equal opportunities, that they did not feel supported, that they felt excluded from conversations with colleagues, that they were lonely at work, that they had been left out of social events, and that they experienced bullying or acts of unkindness at work because of their condition. These issues of exclusion and a lack of support play out detrimentally in the long term. When it came to career progression, the majority, 60% of respondents, said they had not been given progression opportunities during their career, with several people citing a lack of deaf role models within work as a key barrier. Unfortunately, there is a sense in the deaf community that despite numerous government programmes created to remove the effect of disability from the job market, there were still many examples of difficulty accessing the correct type of support and sometimes accessing any support at all. The most glaring evidence that government programmes were ineffective was that those who are deaf or have severe hearing loss are still regarded as expensive employees because of the limitation to the roles they can carry out and the additional support that they require. All of this tells a sad story for people within work who suffer hearing loss, more so because a lot of this is hidden. There are clearly many people who do not feel able to integrate into working life fully, which, as we know, can be a major factor in people's identity and life fulfilment. The lack of support, provision of reasonable adjustments, and at times almost total absence of flexibility was a problem for all participants, particularly in manual or skilled jobs, which leaves many feeling that despite their best efforts, they could not do their job to the best of their ability. We also have to be aware of another hidden aspect, in that for those with hearing loss in work, there's a feeling as though the ability for them to stay in work and keep their job is beyond their control, regardless of work performance, and is ultimately up to those who supervise them in their role. Moreover, there's a feeling that employers regard people who are deaf or have hearing loss as a health and safety burden. For those who had worked for over 10 to 15 years, current health and safety regulations were limiting their work, which is in stark contrast to past working conditions. Quite worryingly, there was a feeling that because of their hearing loss, it would be extremely difficult to find employment elsewhere, and they had to accept their current working conditions or face unemployment. Sadly, the plight of unemployed deaf people is even worse. Being unable to use the phone, almost all contact with prospective employers is via written correspondence, and very often finding a BSL interpreters for interviews can prove challenging. This brings me to my second point, the BSL Act. I, like many others, were very pleased to see that at the end of April this year, the UK Government's BSL Bill received royal assent, passing into law as the BSL Act 2022. For those unfamiliar with the Act, there will now be recognition of British Sign Language as an official language of England, Wales and Scotland. Whilst this is a huge milestone for deaf people, we are not out of the woods in the devolved nations. In England, the law requires the Secretary of State to report on the promotion and facilitation of the use of BSL by ministerial government departments, and guidance must be issued in relation to BSL, setting out how government departments and public bodies must meet the needs of deaf people in the UK. Based on those aims, the Act should improve access to interpreters, as well as enhance general awareness and help develop BSL education. It should also help improve access to employment for deaf people. Because of the devolution settlement, Welsh Government ministers are not subject to the reporting duty of the Act, and therefore it is entirely on the shoulders of Welsh Government ministers here whether or not we see this benefit in Wales. I believe in this instance the Welsh Government needs to recognise the Act in its entirety and take on its full reporting duties, and I would hope that all members here in this chamber would encourage the Welsh Government to adopt this approach. In my final point, I want to discuss audiology services in Wales and the potential role and impact that private audiology practitioners can make. We have an unprecedented need to clear audiology backlogs in Wales. Cardiff and Vale Health Board has almost 1,500 people waiting for treatment, with over 800 having waited 14 months or more for NHS audiology services. There are a further 5,000 more waiting across Wales for much-needed treatment to hear well again, and these figures have only increased since the pandemic. This particular waiting list is significant. Whilst it can be said that hearing loss is not immediately life-threatening, it has a massive impact on the lives of those who are suffering, especially since age-related hearing loss is very common in Wales, with 1% of the population per year of age suffering from it. That means 70% of 70-year-olds and 80% of 80-year-olds, etc. The impact of age-related hearing loss goes far beyond just not being able to hear well. It leads tragically to social isolation, loneliness, mental ill health, dementia, and these conditions then given further rise to other health issues. Waiting more than 14 months for an assessment and hearing aids is no trivial matter if you're 80 years old with increasing cognitive decline. It places you in a highly vulnerable situation, which I have no doubt is truly terrifying for them. There's strong evidence to show that mild hearing loss doubles the risk of developing dementia. Moderate hearing loss leads to 3 times the risk, and severe hearing loss increases the risk 5 times. Hearing loss is estimated to account for 8% of dementia cases, as well as other long-term health problems. People with hearing loss have over a 10-year period a 47% increased rate of hospitalisation because of increased risk for falls and depression. What stands out even further is that if there is a timely diagnosis, then decline in cognitive function can be stopped. So the 14-month waiting lists to access audiology services, without doubt, is harming people. I questioned the First Minister on this point recently, and though I welcome his response that there needs to be a building up of primary care capacity, I believe that this sole approach is short-sighted, not least because it is going to take a considerable amount of time to build up primary care capacity in an NHS that is already overstretched, but also because we have available to us well-established community audiologists that have been proven to be safe, clinically effective, liked by patients, and have been found to deliver good value for money in Ireland, England and elsewhere, and they're available on nearly every high street in Wales. We have to be mindful that we have many patients over the age of 70 who are desperate to access services and simply cannot wait for the lengthy process of each health board undertaking pilots and recruiting directly into the service, and then having to clear the waiting lists that will keep getting longer, which is a situation that I recently experienced as I had just been removed from the outpatients list that I was on because it had grown too long. What is more absurd with this government's approach is the fact that they already use private optometrists, pharmacists, dentists and GP practitioners in Wales to help deliver NHS primary care services. So this government, without any supporting evidence, is singling out audiology services and denying patients in Wales faster access to the service. Members here may not be aware, but in the most recent audit of audiology services in Wales, which I might add was pre-COVID 2019, all health boards in Wales failed in meeting compliance to contact all hearing aid patients every 3 years to offer a reassessment appointment. All health boards also failed this criteria in 2017. Only 5 out of 9 services met or exceeded the compliance target for each individual standard. So we already see, before COVID, patients not getting the audiology services they deserve, and this situation is only getting worse. The number of people with hearing loss is increasing. Estimates suggest that by 2035, about 15.6 million people in the UK will have hearing loss. That's 1 in 5 of the population compared to 1 in 6 people presently. By 2030, adult onset hearing loss will be in the top 10 of disease burdens in the UK, above cataracts and diabetes, as measured by disability life-adjusted years. Frustratingly, this government's attitude to problems with audiology services is bizarre at best and willfully inflicting harm at worst, especially since there is a ready-made solution in high street community audiologists. NHS Wales already commissions primary care optometry and health boards commission community eye health services. So why is this government singling out audiology and not applying the same approach? This, I hope, is a position the Minister will address. Thank you, Clywyd, and thank you to everyone for taking the time to listen. Thank you.